What if I told you that Hollywood finally said the quiet part out loud? What if I told you that after years of polite smiles, cautious interviews, and whispered backlot conversations, the entertainment industry finally reached its breaking point with Meghan Markle? And what if the moment everything cracked open happened not in a boardroom, not in an executive suite, but under bright studio lights during a Jimmy Fallon monologue watched by millions? But before we continue, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell for updates, because that is where our story begins. Not with a scandalous contract leak, not with a studio meltdown, not even with a leaked phone call that would ignite a full-scale PR war. No, it starts with a joke that landed with the force of a physical slap, a joke that Meghan reportedly watched from a private room, her face tightening the way it used to when Suits directors told her to reshoot a scene. A joke that would ripple across Amazon MGM studios and push Hollywood power players into a frenzy of damage control, whispered alliances, and back-channel warnings. But before we get to Fallon's joke, let me ask you something. Have you ever seen a public figure fall from Hollywood grace twice? Most people only get one rise and one fall. Meghan managed both, then left Hollywood, became a duchess, and returned expecting applause, only to face something she did not see coming. An entire industry that had moved on without her. A city of talent, directors, producers, and execs who barely noticed she had returned until the moment she demanded to be noticed. And Hollywood hates that. But let's rewind just a little. Because to understand how Meghan reached this moment of public unraveling, you need to understand the psychology of a comeback. Comebacks are built on humility, patience, quietly rebuilding trust, and relearning the rhythm of an industry that changes faster than the trending page of Instagram. But Meghan didn't return with humility. She came back with a title. She walked into Amazon MGM studios not as a hopeful actress auditioning for a role, but as a duchess ready to be handed a starring position. And Amazon MGM tried. They really did. They wanted Meghan Markle to be their headline project, their prestige drama centerpiece, their streaming powerhouse, their equivalent of an Oscar-bait actress whose presence alone could draw subscribers. They approved a multi-million-dollar development package. They arranged photo ops. They prepped PR strategies. They even held preliminary screenings of sample scripts, imagining what Meghan could do with a dramatic lead role that would redefine her entire public narrative. Hollywood loves reinvention stories, but Hollywood also loves authenticity. And authenticity became the one currency Meghan never learned how to trade. Because while Amazon MGM was spending millions prepping her comeback, Hollywood insiders were whispering doubts. Agents were muttering, "Why her?" Casting directors were shrugging, "We passed on her years ago." And veteran producers, the ones who have survived decades of star meltdowns, were asking the quiet question, can she handle it? Then Fallon's joke detonated the entire situation. But we'll get there. Right now, I want you to picture the exact energy in the room the night Meghan's return to acting reveal leaked online. It wasn't excitement. It wasn't curiosity. It was confusion. Hollywood doesn't like confusion. They like hype, predictability, pathways to profit. But Meghan's reputation was unpredictable. She was loved by some, intensely disliked by others, and distrusted by almost everyone who worked behind the scenes. And then came Amazon MGM Studios' secret dilemma. They had sunk too much money to walk away, but hadn't seen enough to commit fully. They were stuck. Meanwhile, Meghan thought she was rising. This is where the contradiction becomes deliciously ironic. Meghan's return to Hollywood happened at the precise moment Hollywood was pushing back against celebrity entitlement. Actors, directors, showrunners, everyone was watching how studios responded to difficult behavior. No one wanted another Katherine Heigl situation. No one wanted another Lindsay Lohan situation. No one wanted drama. But Meghan brought drama before filming even started. And then Jimmy Fallon added fuel to the fire. Let's zoom in. The studio. The lights. The monologue card in Fallon's hand. The joke was supposed to be harmless. A small quip about Meghan trying to reclaim her D-list era. A throwaway line. Something comedians riff off all the time without consequence. But Meghan doesn't do without consequence. And when Fallon said the words that would echo across Hollywood, words implying Meghan was clawing her way back into a business that never truly missed her, the reaction was instant. Audience laughter. A collective cringe from PR professionals across Los Angeles. And Meghan's team scrambling behind the scenes. Because Meghan didn't hear it as a joke. She heard it as betrayal. And when Meghan feels betrayed, she escalates. That same night, as Fallon's clip went viral, industry insiders began texting one another. This is bad. What does the studio think? How will she respond? Executives hate unpredictability, and Meghan's responses were unpredictable by default. But why did this matter so much? Why did Meghan Markle, a former cable show actress turned duchess turned podcast host turned producer turned would-be Hollywood star, become the center of an industry-wide debate overnight? Because Hollywood finally reached the point where they didn't have to pretend anymore. This isn't a story about a joke. It's a story about the 7 years of tension simmering beneath Hollywood's polite silence. It's about casting directors who remember every email. It's about producers who remember every difficult scene. It's about executives who watched Meghan step into royal life, flame out, step into Netflix, flame out, step into Spotify, flame out, and now step back into Hollywood as if the industry owed her a welcome party. Hollywood does not owe anyone anything. And the moment Fallon made that joke, it gave every Hollywood insider silent permission to react honestly. Suddenly, the whispers came out. The conversations moved from private to semi-public. And for the first time, Amazon MGM Studios realized they weren't only dealing with Meghan Markle the actress. They were dealing with Meghan Markle the lightning rod. That's why this story matters right now. Because Hollywood's patience isn't just thinning, it's evaporating. And Meghan's attempted Hollywood comeback collided with a cultural moment where audiences want authenticity, studios want stability, and celebrities are expected to earn the spotlight instead of demanding it. That's why Amazon MGM executives were panicking behind closed doors. That's why Fallon's joke mattered. But let me pull you deeper into the timeline, because what happened after that monologue was not just a PR headache. It was an earthquake. Within 24 hours, Meghan allegedly had her team contact multiple senior executives at Amazon MGM, demanding that the studio publicly defend her against Fallon's joke. She wanted a correction, an apology, clarity. She wanted Hollywood to react to Fallon the way Buckingham Palace once reacted to tabloid criticism. But Hollywood is not Buckingham Palace. In Hollywood, comedians are protected. In Hollywood, late-night jokes are never apologized for. In Hollywood, celebrities who fight jokes look insecure, not powerful. So when Meghan reportedly pressured the studio, executives were horrified. And this is where the internal conflict began. Executives weren't just worried about Meghan's reaction. They were worried about what the public might think of a duchess trying to censor a comedian. They were worried about becoming part of a culture war controversy they didn't want. They were worried that the actress they just invested millions in would become a PR liability before she even stepped in front of a camera. And then it got worse. Because while Meghan was calling executives, the Fallon clip was going viral for reasons no one predicted. People weren't laughing at the joke. They were analyzing it, debating it, asking whether Fallon knew something insiders had kept quiet. Hollywood gossip accounts began stoking the flames. Comment sections exploded. Threads multiplied. And suddenly, the Meghan comeback narrative had been replaced by the Meghan backlash narrative. Amazon MGM watched their investment sink minute by minute. Let's pause for a moment, because I want you to think about the emotional weight of what was happening behind the scenes. Meghan, who had spent years trying to craft a powerful public image, found it unraveling instantly. Meanwhile, Hollywood executives, who had tried to bank on her fame, now worried they had miscalculated. And Fallon, who had meant nothing malicious, found himself unintentionally triggering one of the biggest Hollywood versus royalty showdowns in recent memory. This is where the buildup of tension meets the reality of Hollywood economics. Because Amazon MGM didn't care about Meghan's feelings. They cared about numbers, audience research, social sentiment, box office potential, and Meghan's numbers were not trending upward. Instead, every hour brought new polls, new comment threads, new headlines framing Meghan as the return of the D-lister. This was the moment Amazon MGM began questioning everything. And here's the twist no one saw coming. Insiders claim Amazon MGM already had a secret dossier assessing Meghan's public reputation. A dossier filled with concerns. A dossier predicting backlash. A dossier Meghan didn't know existed. But the Fallon joke made it impossible to ignore. And the executives finally had to face the question they never wanted to ask. Is Meghan Markle worth the risk? But that question doesn't get answered here. Because the real unraveling begins with something far more explosive, far more revealing, and far more damaging than Fallon's monologue. Something Meghan didn't expect. Something the studio couldn't contain. Something that would redefine her Hollywood comeback forever. And it began with a single leaked recording. But what came next would change everything. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever watched a moment so small, so seemingly harmless, that you only realized later it was the spark that set an entire industry on fire? Because that's exactly what happened on the night Jimmy Fallon stepped onto his studio stage, shuffled his monologue cards, and delivered the 12-second joke heard around the world. 12 seconds. That's all it took to shift Meghan Markle's Hollywood comeback from a carefully constructed PR rise to a spiraling, uncontrollable freefall. The irony? Fallon wasn't trying to be cruel. He wasn't trying to make a political statement. He wasn't even targeting Meghan specifically. It was supposed to be a quick laugh, a throwaway, something his writers tossed onto the cue cards in the final 15 minutes before taping. A joke about celebrity reboots, a nod to the endless carousel of Hollywood comebacks. In fact, the original joke didn't even mention Meghan's name. Her name got added moments before air. But when Fallon said it, the timing was too perfect, too sharp, too real, and the internet felt it instantly. Picture it. The audience packed into the Tonight Show studio, the air faintly buzzing with the same charged excitement you always feel in late-night tapings. Fallon walks out with that signature grin. The crowd applauds. The band kicks a little riff. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, nothing that suggests the next few seconds would ignite an entire week of Hollywood panic. Then Fallon glances down at his cue card, chuckles, and delivers the line. And look, folks, Meghan Markle is officially returning to acting. Amazon MGM picked her up, or as Hollywood calls it, the return of a proud, original D-lister. The audience laughed, but not in the way they usually laugh at his jokes. This laugh had an edge, a twinge, a pulse of shock before the laughter kicked in, like people weren't sure if they should laugh but couldn't help it. And that hesitation, that nanosecond of disbelief, that's what made the joke hit so hard. Because at that exact moment, industry insiders were watching. PR teams were watching. Executives at Amazon MGM were watching. And Meghan Markle was reportedly watching too. Not from the comfort of her living room. Not from her Montecito couch. But from a private media room where her team had planned to monitor public reactions to her comeback announcement. They expected applause. They expected praise. They were not prepared for the D-list joke. Inside that room, witnesses later described the air shifting the second Meghan heard Fallon's words. One moment she was leaning forward, waiting for the positive press she believed was coming. The next moment her jaw tightened, her eyes narrowed, and the room reportedly went silent except for the echo of Fallon's line bouncing like a slap. A single joke, a single label. But in Hollywood, labels matter. And Meghan knew it. What stunned her wasn't the insult itself. She had heard worse. What stunned her was the fact that someone of Fallon's status said it. A mainstream comedian. A friendly face. Someone who plays it safe. Someone studios trust. Fallon is not a troublemaker. He avoids controversy like a lifeline. If Fallon said it, it meant one thing. Everyone was thinking it. And the internet confirmed that within minutes. Clips of the monologue hit Twitter before the show even finished taping. Fans posted reactions in real time. Fallon's line turned into a meme within the first hour. People loved it. Others hated it. Some said Fallon crossed a line. Others said he simply told the truth. But what mattered most was the reaction coming from one specific corner of Twitter. Hollywood insiders. Writers. Producers. Assistant directors. Agents. They were quote tweeting the joke. Not attacking Fallon. Not defending Meghan. But laughing. Laughing too loudly. Laughing like a weight had been lifted. Laughing like someone finally broke the spell. And that's what scared Amazon MGM. Because if the insiders were laughing, it meant the industry wasn't afraid to mock Meghan anymore. The polite silence was gone. The carefully measured respect dissolved instantly. Meghan had spent years believing Hollywood missed her. In one night, Fallon revealed the opposite. But while the internet was laughing, Amazon MGM executives were panicking. Inside the corporate offices, where the show was being monitored in real time, the reaction was immediate and intense. Phones lit up. Slack channels erupted. A senior executive reportedly typed 4 words. This is not good. Why? Because they had just poured millions into building Meghan's comeback vehicle. They were preparing to announce her as the lead in a prestige drama. They had money, staff, schedules, investors, and international marketing plans lined up. They were banking on Meghan Markle the brand. And now that brand had been publicly labeled D-list before the project even launched. There is no bigger nightmare for a studio. But the studio's panic was nothing compared to Meghan's. Because while Amazon executives were scrambling behind screens, Meghan was pacing the floor of that private room. Witnesses claim she muttered under her breath, repeating the line again and again. D-list, D-list, D-list. Not because it hurt her feelings. Meghan's ego is harder than titanium. It was because the word carried something far more devastating. It threatened her comeback narrative. The entire point of her Hollywood return was to step back into the spotlight as a serious, sophisticated actress. Not as the girl from Suits. Not as the cable show side star. Not as the actress who spent years auditioning for roles she never got. She wanted a prestige rebirth. And Fallon overshadowed all of it in 12 seconds. Her team immediately divided into crisis roles. One began reviewing Fallon's exact wording for legal angles. Another pulled up trending hashtags. Another called a PR strategist at midnight. The tension in the room was so thick that one assistant reportedly left in tears. You have to understand, Meghan's team doesn't operate like a traditional Hollywood crew. They operate like political staffers in a campaign war room. Everything is immediate. Everything is high stakes. Everything is urgent. And this was their worst-case scenario. Meanwhile, across the city, in a small corner of NBC headquarters, Fallon was oblivious. The man had just wrapped taping and was in his dressing room, laughing with staff, sipping water, and joking around as if nothing significant had happened. Because to him, nothing significant had happened. It was just another monologue, another night, another laugh. But the fallout was already spreading like wildfire. Within the hour, industry podcasts began recording emergency commentary. Twitter accounts that specialize in Hollywood gossip started asking whether Fallon was referencing something insiders knew. Fans pulled up old rumors about Meghan's acting career. TikTok creators began stitching the Fallon clip with Meghan's past interviews about being a strong female lead. But the real damage wasn't online. It was backstage. Because someone in the Tonight Show audience had recorded more than the joke. They had recorded Fallon's off-air comments, the ones he made during the commercial break. Comments Meghan wasn't supposed to hear. Comments Amazon MGM executives weren't supposed to hear. Comments that would soon leak and hit the industry like a truck. But before we get to the leak, we need to talk about the way Fallon reacted immediately after delivering the joke. Because that reaction was the second blow Meghan didn't expect. For a split second, after the laughter subsided, Fallon hesitated. He smirked, looked off stage, tilted his head, and said something that wasn't in the script. Hey, it's Hollywood. Everybody gets a reboot. Even the ones nobody asked for. The audience roared. Fallon's writers didn't write that line. He improvised it. And Meghan felt the sting of that more than the original joke. Improvised lines come from truth. They come from instinct. They come from a comedian's natural understanding of public sentiment. And Fallon's instinct told him that the audience would laugh harder at Meghan's expense. That terrified Meghan. That terrified Amazon MGM. Because it meant the tide had shifted. It meant Meghan was no longer a protected darling. It meant comedians felt safe poking fun at her again. And when comedians stopped being afraid, Hollywood follows. But the most dangerous thing of all was still coming. Because when the show cut to commercial, Fallon put down his cards, laughed to someone off camera, and made a comment that would become the first major leak of the scandal. The person in the audience who recorded it didn't mean to start a Hollywood earthquake. They just happened to be filming the stage. But what they caught, Fallon's casual remark about Meghan and Amazon MGM, would change everything. And that recording, once leaked, would ignite the internal crisis that dragged Amazon MGM into the biggest PR nightmare of the year. We'll get to that recording in the next chapter. But before we move on, ask yourself this. Why would a comedian known for playing it safe feel suddenly comfortable making Meghan the punchline? What did he sense? What did he hear backstage? What shifting energy in Hollywood did he pick up on? Because Fallon didn't create this storm. He exposed it. But what came next would make Fallon's joke look tame. And no one, not Meghan, not Amazon MGM, not even Fallon himself, saw it coming. What if I told you Meghan Markle's Hollywood comeback wasn't a coincidence, a passion project, or some long-awaited creative awakening? What if the truth is far less romantic and far more calculated? Because the reality behind Amazon MGM's decision to cast Meghan didn't begin with inspiration. It began with fear. Corporate fear. Financial fear. Streaming wars fear. And in the entertainment industry, fear breeds desperate gambles. This chapter isn't about Meghan's reaction to Fallon's joke. This is about what came before. The hidden foundation. The secret deal Amazon MGM hoped no one would ever dissect. Because long before Jimmy Fallon ever uttered the word delister, something far more complicated was unfolding behind closed doors. Let's go back months before the joke, to a quiet conference room inside Amazon MGM headquarters. A room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Los Angeles. A table polished so glossy you could see your own reflection in it. A room where the future of Meghan Markle's Hollywood comeback was quietly, nervously, and reluctantly crafted. It started with a simple directive from above. Streaming needed a win. Every streaming platform was struggling. Subscriber fatigue. Declining engagement. Too many platforms, not enough viewers. And someone in an executive office floated an idea that sounded bold at first, then genius, then inevitable. What if we give Meghan Markle her big acting comeback? It's easy to imagine the pitch. A studio executive stands in front of the room, slides projected behind them. Meghan's face. Montecito Mansion. Oprah interview. Wedding dress. Royal drama. Headlines. Controversy. The executive makes a case that sounds brilliant when spoken confidently enough. She has global recognition. She brings royal mystique. She's polarizing, but polarization drives engagement. Netflix squeezed tens of millions of hours of viewership out of Harry and Meghan. Spotify built an entire PR cycle around her podcast. Meghan was still a talking point in every tabloid. And Amazon MGM thought they saw an opportunity. Not to make a masterpiece. Not to launch a cinematic classic. But to create the kind of series people watch because they want to see the drama unfold on and off screen. A hate watch is still a watch. That's what one exec allegedly said. And that was enough. But the problem wasn't the idea. It was the way the idea collided with Meghan's expectations. When Amazon MGM quietly approached Meghan, she didn't see desperation. She saw validation. She saw the moment she had been waiting for since Suits ended. The moment she could rewrite her Hollywood narrative. The moment she could prove she was meant for film prestige, not basic cable legal drama. And she returned to the negotiation table with the confidence of someone who believed Hollywood owed her a second chance. That confidence created the first crack in the foundation. Because while Meghan saw a creative opportunity, Amazon MGM saw a marketing strategy. They didn't need her to be brilliant. They needed her to be loud. They needed her to create headlines, ignite discourse, stir controversy. They needed her to be Meghan Markle, the lightning rod, not Meghan Markle, the actress. And that distinction shaped every clause of the secret deal. Let's walk through what insiders claim the contract included. First, unprecedented creative involvement. Meghan wanted input on script direction, episode arcs, character development, and even casting decisions for supporting roles. She didn't just want to act. She wanted to imprint, to shape, to steer, to influence. And Amazon MGM, hungry enough, allowed it. Not fully, but enough to make her feel powerful. Second, a massive PR protection clause. This was the one that executives whispered about with regret later. Meghan reportedly wanted the studio to help rehabilitate her public image, to manage headlines, to counter negativity, to steer narratives. Essentially, she wanted Amazon MGM to act as a hybrid between a studio and a royal press office. Third, control over on-set photography. Meghan insisted on approval before any behind-the-scenes photos, promos, or stills were released. She didn't want the internet dissecting her angles, her wardrobe, her expressions. Not after the years of harsh tabloid scrutiny. Fourth, a guaranteed lead role with built-in awards consideration. Yes, she wanted the show positioned for Emmy attention. And yet none of this was the real problem. The real problem was that Amazon MGM executives signed these terms with the same mentality gamblers get when they're down to their last chips. They thought they could manage Meghan. They thought they could shape the narrative. They thought they could ride the controversy wave. But Meghan didn't want to be managed. And that is where the contract became a time bomb. Let's cut to a pivotal moment inside Amazon MGM. A highly confidential meeting. A dozen executives gathered around that glossy table. A contract draft in front of them. Meghan's lawyers on speakerphone. The room stiff with tension. One executive raises a concern. Are we sure about this? Another insists the risk is worth it. A third notes they don't have many high-profile projects in development. A fourth argues that Meghan's name alone will generate massive press. And then someone asks the question that would haunt them later. What if Meghan becomes difficult to work with? The room goes silent. Everyone remembers the rumors. The Suits era whispers. The royal staff resignations. The Spotify fallout. But executives convince themselves that this is different. That they can handle her. That she will be on her best behavior because she wants this comeback. Wishful thinking disguised as strategy. Because wishful thinking is exactly how Hollywood ends up with its worst scandals. When the deal was finalized, Meghan was ecstatic. She sent voice notes to friends. She celebrated. She believed she was finally stepping into her rightful A-list chapter. Amazon MGM executives, meanwhile, crossed their fingers and hoped their gamble wouldn't explode in their faces. But the cracks began showing almost immediately. The first sign? Meghan's difficulty with early script drafts. Writers spent weeks crafting a complex protagonist, only for Meghan to reject scenes, dialogue, motivations. She wanted the character reshaped into a version of herself. Polished, morally perfect, inspirational. The writers were frustrated. They wanted depth, flaws, grit. Meghan wanted control. The second sign? Meghan's punctuality. She reportedly missed multiple table read appointments or arrived late, offering explanations that sounded more like PR lines than logistical issues. The third sign? Tension between Meghan and the casting team. Meghan allegedly vetoed actresses who auditioned for secondary roles, claiming they were too distracting. Rumors swirled that she didn't want anyone younger or more charismatic on screen beside her. The fourth sign? Meghan's interactions with producers. They described her as simultaneously overly involved and strangely detached, micromanaging small details but ignoring broader structural choices, pushing for changes without understanding production limitations. But these were the internal issues no one outside the building knew about. The real storm began brewing when Amazon MGM realized Meghan's public image was not improving. In fact, it was deteriorating. Fast. Every headline about her and Harry, every scandal, every controversy, every awkward photo resurfaced and became ammunition for online mockery. Public sentiment trended downward, and Amazon MGM panicked. Meanwhile, Meghan remained convinced her comeback would be triumphant. She believed the industry was waiting for her. She believed she'd been wronged before and Hollywood would redeem her now. This misplaced confidence collided beautifully with the desperation of Amazon MGM. But the biggest irony? Meghan believed she was Amazon's prized actress. In reality, she was their strategic risk, their controversial experiment, their attempt to see whether scandal could convert into streaming numbers. Hollywood doesn't gamble with kindness. It gambles with calculation. So when the Fallon joke aired, Amazon MGM executives weren't just embarrassed. They were terrified. They were terrified because the joke struck at the exact insecurity they had spent months trying to hide. Hollywood didn't see Meghan as an A-lister, a star, or a prestige actress. They saw her as a D-lister trying to upgrade brands. And the joke wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was the reaction coming from inside Amazon MGM. Because moments after Fallon's clip went viral, a junior executive sent a message to her boss that perfectly captured the disaster. Fallon said what everyone in the industry already thinks. That message circulated internally, screenshotted, shared. It reached senior leadership. It sparked fear, frustration, denial. Because Amazon MGM had bet millions on a narrative the industry didn't believe. The panic didn't stop there. Amazon MGM's PR department immediately flagged the situation as a crisis. A crisis with legs. A crisis with teeth. A crisis that would derail their entire project unless managed correctly. They began drafting possible responses. They debated whether to issue a statement supporting Meghan. They considered reaching out to Fallon's team privately. They considered addressing the joke publicly. But the contradiction paralyzed them. If they defended Meghan too aggressively, the public would accuse them of censoring humor. If they remained silent, Meghan would accuse them of failing to support her. If they addressed the joke at all, they'd shine a spotlight on it. No option looked safe. And then Meghan made things infinitely worse. Her reaction to the joke, her anger, her demands, her insistence that the studio take action transformed the situation from a minor PR hiccup into an existential crisis for the entire project. Because while Fallon's joke embarrassed the studio, what Meghan did next threatened their entire investment. And Amazon MGM executives, desperate to assess the fallout, convened an emergency late-night meeting. They sat around that glossy table once again, staring at one another, asking the same question they'd been afraid to voice since the beginning. Did we make a mistake? One executive reportedly shook his head and whispered, "We underestimated her." Another added, "We underestimated the backlash." And another, in the quietest voice of all, "We underestimated Hollywood." Hollywood had spoken, not through a scandal, not through a leak, but through a joke. And now, for the first time, Amazon MGM executives began revisiting their internal assessments of Meghan. And that is when someone brought up a document few people knew existed. A document that Meghan had never seen. A document that would soon become the most damaging leak of all. A confidential Amazon MGM memo titled, "Reputational Risk Mitigation, Talent, MM." And once that memo was exposed, the studio's gamble would reveal itself for what it truly was. A disaster waiting to happen. But what came next would push Amazon MGM into full crisis mode, and no one saw it coming. Have you ever seen a document so explosive that everyone who read it felt the blood drain from their face? A document so carefully worded, so clinically brutal, so quietly damning that it could take down reputations in a single afternoon? That is exactly what the Amazon MGM executives were staring at when someone, during the emergency meeting triggered by the Fallon monologue, slid a certain confidential memo across the table. And here's the disturbing truth. Meghan Markle's Hollywood comeback didn't implode because of a joke. It imploded because of a memo. A memo no one outside the highest executive tier was ever supposed to see. A memo hidden inside a restricted access digital folder. A memo labeled in sterile corporate language but pulsing with red flags between every line. The memo's title alone sent chills down the spine of every executive present. Reputational Risk Mitigation, Talent, MM. It didn't mention Meghan Markle by full name. It didn't need to. Everyone knew who MM was. Everyone knew why the memo existed. And everyone knew that if Meghan ever saw it, the fallout would be catastrophic. Let's rewind a bit. Most people think the entertainment industry runs on creativity, talent, passion, and visionary ideas. It doesn't. It runs on risk assessment. Every actor is a number. Every director is a probability. Every project is a gamble. Hollywood might shimmer under lights, but behind the scenes it's just spreadsheets, sentiment analysis, and prediction models. That memo was the smoking gun showing exactly how Amazon MGM really viewed Meghan. Not as a star, not as a creative powerhouse, not as the next big talent, but as a risk. A statistically quantifiable, financially measurable, PR-sensitive risk. And the executives had been ignoring that risk until Fallon's joke forced them to look it dead in the eyes. The memo, according to insiders who later described its contents on Background, wasn't written by a PR junior or an assistant or a marketing intern. It was written by Amazon's in-house risk and reputation analysis division. A team of analysts, strategists, and crisis consultants who specialize in calculating the fallout potential of celebrity partnerships. That's right. Amazon MGM didn't sign Meghan for her talent. They signed her despite the risks. And the memo laid out exactly what those risks were. Let me walk you through what insiders say were the key sections of the document, the ones executives silently reread again and again during that meeting, each sentence revealing a new layer of potential disaster. The first section was labeled Public Sentiment Trajectory. This section charted the rise and fall of Meghan's public perception over several years. It wasn't emotional. It wasn't biased. It was numbers, graphs, trend lines. The memo showed that Meghan's public favorability had been dropping consistently for years, with particularly sharp declines after the Netflix docuseries and the Spotify fallout. One executive reportedly whispered, This decline is irreversible. Another responded. We thought the show would reverse it, but the graph said otherwise. And graphs don't lie. The next section was even more brutal. Consistency of audience perception across demographics. This part explained the painful truth. Meghan wasn't loved by any particular demographic strongly enough to counterbalance the backlash. Younger viewers saw her as inconsistent. Older viewers saw her as inauthentic. International audiences saw her as overexposed. American viewers saw her as polarizing. British viewers, well, we don't even need to discuss that. In Hollywood terms, this made Meghan what insiders call reputationally unstable. A reputation that can't be predicted. A reputation that can't be contained. A reputation that can turn at any moment, for any reason. Then came the section no one wanted to read aloud. Potential for negative narrative reinforcement. This part stated that Meghan's presence in a project could unintentionally resurrect old controversies. Every promotional cycle risked relighting past scandals. Every interview risked reminding the public of things they disliked. Meghan wasn't just a celebrity with baggage. She was a celebrity whose baggage refused to stay zipped. And this is where the memo took a darker turn. Because the next section listed what the analysts called vulnerability indicators. These indicators measured how likely it was that Meghan would ignite controversy without warning. The memo didn't judge her personality. It judged her pattern. It pointed out, with clinical detachment, that Meghan had a documented history of creating unexpected PR complications. Sudden public statements, unapproved interviews, leaked drafts from her team, disputes with employers, see Spotify, negative headlines during major campaigns, strained relationships with former colleagues, unexpected lawsuits and legal threats. The analysts didn't say Meghan was a problem. They said Meghan caused problems. The distinction matters. Then came the part of the memo that truly horrified the executives. A section titled, Projected Backlash Scenarios. This section listed potential outcomes, worst case, moderate case, best case, if Meghan joined the project. The worst case scenario? A negative viral moment that overshadows the entire production. Sound familiar? Fallon's joke pushed the studio directly into the worst case scenario outlined in the memo. And this is where the panic began to snowball. But the memo wasn't done yet. There was another section that would push Amazon MGM into full alarm. Likelihood of talent becoming a strategic liability. Inside this section was a sentence executives later reported reading aloud in disbelief. Talent displays a pattern of high unpredictability with elevated probability of reputational volatility. This may create challenges in controlling press cycles, managing talent interactions, and containing off-message communications. Translation: Meghan Markle is unpredictable. And unpredictable actors cost studios millions. But the most damning part of the memo wasn't a sentence. It wasn't a paragraph. It wasn't even a chart. It was the final page. A simple list titled, Recommended Precautions Before Contract Approval. These recommendations included safeguard clauses for PR-related breaches, limitations on creative interference, stipulated behavior expectations, mandatory crisis management consultation, restrictions on public statements during filming, pre-approved talking points, and the final recommendation. Reconsider talent selection if ongoing sentiment decline is observed. That final line was a dagger. Because sentiment decline was not only ongoing, it was accelerating. But the memo had been ignored, buried, left in a digital folder executives pretended didn't exist because they were too afraid of losing the one high-profile project they had in development. Fallon's monologue was the moment that forced them to open it again. When the emergency meeting hit its peak intensity, the executive who had rediscovered the memo pushed it into the center of the table. The others leaned in. They skimmed. Their faces dropped. One senior executive reportedly whispered, "We should never have signed her." Another muttered, "This is exactly what we predicted." And then the highest-ranking executive in the room said something that chilled the group. "This memo cannot get out. If this leaks, we're done." Oh, the irony. Because that's exactly what happened. The memo leaked. But not because an executive accidentally emailed it to the wrong person. Not because a staffer printed it out and left it behind. Not because a hacker stole it. It leaked because someone inside the room, someone trusted, someone high-ranking, knew the situation was spiraling beyond control. And they believed the only way to protect the studio was to let the truth slip out. The leak didn't go directly to the press. It went to someone who had influence without scrutiny. A Hollywood gossip account. A notorious one. An account known for dropping small but devastating crumbs of information that ripple into industry-wide storms. Late that night, the account posted a vague but unmistakable blind item. Major studio panicking after a late-night host calls out their newest controversial talent. Internal documents show the studio knew this was a bad idea. Those who knew, knew. Within minutes, insiders began whispering, texting, calling. Rumor threads exploded across Reddit. PR strategists picked up the scent. Former studio employees chimed in with coded comments. Entertainment journalists started digging. The memo itself hadn't leaked, but the idea of the memo had. And that was enough to ignite fear across Amazon MGM. Because everyone in Hollywood knows this rule. If people start talking about a memo, the memo always comes out. And it did. Not fully. Not publicly. Not in its entirety. But enough of its content, enough of its key phrases, enough of its conclusions found their way to 3 journalists and 2 bloggers within 48 hours. The memo had said Meghan Markle was a reputational risk. The memo had said Meghan was unpredictable. The memo had said her comeback could backfire. The memo had said exactly what Fallon's joke implied. Suddenly, Amazon MGM wasn't fighting public embarrassment anymore. They were fighting exposure. In the industry, when the truth aligns with public perception, the damage spreads instantly. And Meghan felt it. Because when the memo's existence became whispered Hollywood knowledge, Meghan realized the studio she trusted to protect her image, trusted to support her comeback, had quietly built a risk assessment file warning against her. And that betrayal cut deeper than Fallon's joke ever could. But the true explosion didn't come from Meghan. It came from a recorded phone call. A phone call Meghan made in anger. A phone call Meghan made to an Amazon MGM executive. A phone call someone recorded. A phone call that would leak. A phone call that would turn a reputational crisis into a nuclear meltdown. But what came next would make the memo look harmless. And no one saw it coming. Have you ever heard a phone call so raw, so heated, so dangerously revealing that you instantly knew it was never meant for the public? The kind of call where words spill out faster than caution can catch them? Where emotion overrides strategy? Where a single sentence, spoken in anger, can detonate months of corporate planning? Because that is exactly the kind of phone call Meghan Markle made the night Jimmy Fallon unleashed the 12-second joke that sent Hollywood spiraling. This wasn't a polite celebrity complaint. This wasn't a structured PR conversation. This wasn't a calm request for clarification. This was rage. Pure, unfiltered, unrestrained rage. The kind of rage that doesn't care who is listening. The kind of rage that doesn't consider consequences. The kind of rage that leaves a trail. And Meghan didn't know it would be recorded. Let's start at the moment the Fallon clip finished playing in Meghan's private media room. Her team had gone silent. Her publicist stared at her shoes. Her assistant pretended to check messages. The mood had shifted from expectation to dread. It was in that silence. Thick, buzzing, suffocating, that Meghan grabbed her phone and walked into another room. Witnesses say she didn't close the door. She didn't lower her voice. She didn't hesitate. She dialed a direct number at Amazon MGM Studios. Not her liaison. Not her producer. Not her assistant's contact. She called a senior executive directly. A man who, until that moment, believed their conversations were strictly professional. He answered immediately. He knew why she was calling. Everyone knew why Meghan would be calling. But no one expected what came out of her mouth. The call began with a question. A sharp one. The type that doesn't invite an answer. Did you see what Fallon just said? Her tone, according to those who later heard the recording, was breathless. The kind of breathlessness that doesn't come from panic, but from fury. Her voice trembled, not from fear, but from indignation. The executive tried to calm her. He tried to frame Fallon's joke as harmless. He tried to remind her that comedians poke fun at everyone. That's when Meghan snapped. Harmless? He called me a D-list actress. Do you understand how humiliating that is? Do you understand what that does to me? To the show? To the brand? Her words hit like a whip. Sharp. Fast. Delivered with the force of someone who believes the universe owes her an explanation. The executive attempted to reassure her again, but Meghan had already shifted gears. Her voice rose, cutting through the air like broken glass. You need to fix this. Amazon needs to fix this. There it was. The demand. The expectation. The belief that the studio existed to protect her image. The executive paused. A long pause. Too long. Meghan filled the space. You need to contact NBC. You need to tell them this is unacceptable. Fallon needs to walk this back. I won't be the punchline of his show. Not when I'm preparing to lead a major series for Amazon. This undermines everything. Her tone wasn't just angry. It was commanding, regal, as if she expected the entire entertainment industry to realign itself around her. But the executive hesitated again. This time, not from shock, but from fear, because he knew what Amazon MGM could and could not do. And calling NBC to demand a comedian retract a joke was not only impossible, it was suicidal. Hollywood doesn't bend to talent. Not even Duchess talent. Especially not Duchess talent. Executives might coddle celebrities privately, but they never challenge a comedian publicly. Comedians are protected. They are the pressure valves of the entertainment industry. The joke must be free. The monologue must be untouchable. The executive tried a different angle. Meghan, I don't think it would be appropriate for Amazon to interfere with late-night content. We don't want to escalate the situation. Wrong answer. Very wrong answer. Because Meghan did not hear caution. She heard betrayal. Her voice, recorded faintly, crackling slightly through the audio, shifted from anger to disbelief. A colder, deeper tone. So you're not going to defend me? The executive tried to explain the complexities. That Fallon is independent. That Amazon has no jurisdiction. That interfering would cause greater backlash. That they needed to strategize before reacting. Meghan cut him off. Strategize? So you're strategizing while I'm being humiliated on national television. She wasn't listening. She wasn't absorbing. She was spiraling. And then she said the line that would haunt Amazon MGM for months. If you can't protect your lead actress, then maybe you're not the right studio for this project. Dead silence. The executive froze. Because threats, in Hollywood, are not just threats. They are signals, warnings, indicators that a talent may become difficult to manage. And Meghan had just confirmed every fear written in the reputational memo. But the call didn't end there. Meghan pivoted again, this time attacking the memo she didn't yet know existed. You know exactly why Fallon feels entitled to mock me. Because Hollywood still thinks they can step on me. And I expect Amazon to push back. I expect support. I expect loyalty. Loyalty. The word echoed. Meghan didn't want partnership. She wanted allegiance. But the executive, struggling to maintain composure, attempted once again to soothe the situation. We do support you. We value you. We are committed to this project. We just need to approach this carefully. Another mistake. Meghan struck again. You need to release a statement by morning. A statement. Defending her. Condemning Fallon. Declaring loyalty. Amazon MGM would never agree to that. Could never agree to that. Would destroy itself if it did. The executive hesitated for a third time. We can't do that. And just like that, Meghan's voice dropped to a chilling calm. Oh, you can't. But Fallon can humiliate me publicly, and you can't say a single word? Understood. That understood was a dagger. Cold. Sharp. Final. But she wasn't finished. Let me be very clear. If Amazon does not publicly support me, then I will publicly name who failed me. The executive's voice cracked. Meghan, that's not fair. But she wasn't negotiating anymore. She was issuing an ultimatum. You have until 8 a.m. to decide whose side you're on. Then she hung up. The call ended in dead air. Heavy, suffocating dead air. And that should have been the end. A tense conversation. A celebrity meltdown. A frustrated executive. A crisis brewing quietly. But it wasn't the end. Because someone recorded the call. Someone who heard every word. Someone who had access to the executive's line. Someone who understood that what Meghan said wasn't just emotional. It was professionally dangerous. Maybe it was an internal compliance tool. Maybe it was a staffer instructed to record calls. Maybe it was a personal decision made in the heat of panic. But the recording existed. And within 24 hours, it leaked. Not publicly. Not to the press. Not to tabloids. It leaked internally. To people who shouldn't have heard it. To people whose job was to protect Amazon MGM's reputation. To people who now had evidence that Meghan Markle wasn't just a risk. She was a liability. Because in that one phone call, Meghan had demanded censorship, threatened publicity backlash, questioned the studio's loyalty, issued ultimatums, and challenged the authority of the executives leading her project. That recording circulated quietly among Amazon MGM executives. Each department received it. Some listened twice. Some listened with their heads in their hands. Some listened with growing dread. And every person who heard it said the same thing. This cannot continue. But the nightmare didn't stop there. Because Meghan, unaware of the leak, continued escalating. Her team drafted statements, drafted posts, drafted talking points. Several versions, actually. Some attacking Fallon, some attacking NBC, some demanding respect, some implying a culture of bias. The drafts were so inflammatory that one Amazon PR executive reportedly said, "If she posts this, the project is dead." Meanwhile, the recording kept spreading through the studio. Then it reached one person it should never have reached, a senior Amazon legal advisor. And that advisor immediately recognized the threat. Meghan had exposed the studio to liability, to chaos, to unpredictable PR fallout, to contractual disputes, to potential breach of behavior clauses. The advisor sent an email that hit every corner of the studio. "We need to evaluate the impact of Meghan's conduct on project viability." That was corporate language for, "We might need to drop her." But the internal storm wasn't the final blow. The final blow came from outside Amazon MGM entirely. Because someone, still anonymous, forwarded a short excerpt of the audio to a Hollywood insider. Not the full recording, just enough. A 30-second clip. 30 seconds of Meghan's most furious lines. And that insider didn't post it, didn't publish it, didn't leak it to Twitter. They shared it in a private group chat. A group chat filled with agents, producers, writers, and assistants. Within hours, dozens of people had heard it. Within a day, hundreds. Within a weekend, every major agency in Los Angeles had heard whispers of it. Meghan threatened Amazon MGM. Meghan demanded censorship. Meghan pressured executives. Meghan issued ultimatums. And every agent, every producer, every casting director remembered the memo. Suddenly, Meghan's Hollywood reputation wasn't based on rumor. It was based on evidence. The evidence she accidentally provided herself. The leak of the call didn't reach the public, but it reached the people who mattered. The gatekeepers, the decision-makers, the insiders. And that changed everything. Because Amazon MGM wasn't just questioning their gamble anymore. They were reconsidering it entirely. And Meghan had no idea how bad things had become. Because while she was preparing her next move, another recording was about to surface. A recording far more damaging. A recording that would expose Meghan's past. A recording Amazon MGM didn't even know existed. A recording from someone who worked with her long before the royal title. But what came next would make the leaked phone call look like a whisper, and no one saw it coming. What happens when a studio realizes, too late, that the star they gambled millions on might be the very person who sinks the entire ship? What happens when the comeback they thought would save them suddenly threatens their credibility, their financial projections, their internal stability, everything? Because that is exactly the question Amazon MGM executives were finally forced to confront as Meghan's private phone call spread like wildfire through the highest levels of the company. Is Meghan worth the risk? It was the bluntest, most dangerous question you can ask about a lead actress after a project has already been announced, staffed, funded, and quietly sold to international partners. But the moment that audio clip of Meghan's enraged phone call circulated internally, the question stopped being hypothetical. Executives had to say it out loud. And inside Amazon MGM headquarters, the tension was so thick it practically pressed into the walls. Imagine the scene. A dozen senior executives gathered around a long obsidian conference table. Phones turned face down. Doors locked. Curtains drawn. A sense of dread that only grows heavier with each passing minute. No one speaks at first. They're all thinking the same thing. They should have trusted the memo. The memo that said Meghan was volatile. The memo that said Meghan was polarizing. The memo that said Meghan was a risk. But they didn't trust the memo. They trusted the fantasy. The fantasy of a Meghan Markle Hollywood resurrection. But fantasies don't save studios. Reality does. And the reality in front of them was ugly. The phone call Meghan made in her rage had confirmed every single red flag buried in that risk assessment file. Proof that Meghan wasn't just a reputational gamble, but a reputational explosion waiting for the right spark. Fallon was the spark. Meghan was the explosion. Now Amazon MGM was standing in the debris, trying to figure out how to clean up something that was still actively burning. The meeting began with one executive clearing his throat and asking the question everyone else was afraid to voice. Do we move forward with her? Silence. You could have heard the hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. Finally, another executive spoke. She threatened us. She demanded a public statement. She tried to dictate our response to a comedian. This isn't normal behavior. Someone else chimed in. It's not just the behavior. It's the perception. Talent who react like this create chaos. Investors get nervous. Partners hesitate. And when investors get nervous, projects get pulled. Then another voice, sharper, colder. And the phone call leaked. If we continue with her, we are endorsing her behavior. A younger executive, clearly anxious, tried to offer a gentler take. She's emotional. She's under pressure. This is a major moment for her. Maybe it's understandable. She just wants to feel supported. But the room wasn't buying it. Because the truth wasn't about emotion. It wasn't about pressure. It wasn't about Fallon. It was about patterns. Patterns never lie. And Meghan had a pattern. A visible, undeniable pattern that one executive finally articulated with painful clarity. This is what she does. She escalates. She pressures. She weaponizes public image. She turns crises into chaos. This isn't a one-time incident. This is her track record. There it was. The truth no one wanted to admit, but everyone already knew. Meghan's pattern wasn't new. It wasn't surprising. It wasn't unpredictable. It was consistent. A consistent cycle of conflict, controversy, and confrontation. The executive sat with that for a moment. Then another voice, one from the finance side, perhaps the only voice brave enough to speak in numbers, broke the silence. We've already spent close to 8 figures on early development. If we drop her now, we lose all of that. Heads nodded. Money matters. Money always matters. Another executive spoke. But if we keep her, we may lose more. This was the turning point of the meeting, because it reframed the entire debate. The question wasn't just whether Meghan was worth the money. The question was whether she was worth the reputational cost. Hollywood doesn't care about drama behind the scenes until it affects the bottom line. And Meghan's drama was now bleeding into public perception. Fallon's joke changed the narrative. The leaked phone call reinforced the narrative. And the memo's existence, now semi-leaked to insiders, cemented the narrative. Meghan Markle was officially becoming a liability. But this meeting wasn't just about numbers and PR damage. It was about the survival instinct of executives who saw a disaster forming and weren't sure how to stop it. A senior executive leaned back in his chair and said something that chilled the room. Ask yourself this. If we hadn't already signed her, would we sign her today? The answer hit everyone instantly. No, absolutely not. Not after the Fallon joke went viral. Not after the phone call. Not after the internal leak. Not after the memo resurfaced. Another executive said something even harsher. We signed her for attention. Now she's giving us attention, but the wrong kind. That sparked a new burst of tension. One executive, someone who likely advocated strongly for Meghan early on, jumped in with a defensive tone. She can still deliver. She still draws engagement. This doesn't have to be the end. But then, perhaps the coldest voice in the room, cut in with a slow, steady sentence that silenced the table. But will anyone watch her, or will they watch to see her fail? That was the core of it. Studios don't want pity watches. They don't want disaster watches. They don't want cringe watches. They want traction, intention, curiosity, respect. But Meghan's comeback wasn't attracting respect. It was attracting mockery. And the one thing Hollywood cannot build a prestige project around is mockery. Suddenly, the executives shifted from debating Meghan's worth to debating their own mistakes. We underestimated the backlash. We thought we could control the narrative. We didn't think Fallon would trigger this reaction. We didn't anticipate she'd escalate so fast. And finally, we should have listened to the analysts. The analysts, the ones who wrote that memo, had predicted everything. Sentiment volatility, risk of public meltdown, likelihood of conflicts, probability of backlash, instability of reputation, high chances of project disruption. And here they were, living inside every single predicted outcome, before filming even started. Then the conversation turned darker. Because someone brought up a scenario no one had dared speak of yet. What happens if we move forward and she has another meltdown during production? Everyone knew what that meant. Delays, reshoots, crew resignations, director disputes, bad press, possible cancellations, financial chaos. Hollywood has endured difficult celebrities for decades, but only when their talent outweighed the trouble. Was Meghan that kind of talent? No one said yes, not even her supporters, because the truth was too obvious. Meghan wasn't Meryl Streep. She wasn't Viola Davis. She wasn't Cate Blanchett. She wasn't even her former Suits co-star Sarah Rafferty. She was Meghan Markle, a celebrity with a brand, not an actress with undeniable skill. And that made her replaceable. Very replaceable. One executive finally asked the question looming over everyone. Do we recast? The room stiffened. Recasting a lead before production is embarrassing but survivable. Recasting a duchess?